The snow fell harder than it had in 3 decades. Maya-chan pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders as she stumbled through the abandoned streets of New Denver Colony. Her breath came out in white puffs that froze before they could drift away. The temperature had dropped to minus 40 degrees Celsius, and the heating systems in the outer districts had failed 2 days ago. She wasn't supposed to be here. As a xenobiology researcher, Maya should have been safe in the inner city's climate-controlled laboratories. But, when the Zephyrian attack ships appeared in the sky 3 weeks ago, everything changed. The alien invaders had targeted the power grid first, then, the communication networks. Now they were systematically hunting down human survivors, district by district. Maya's feet had gone numb hours ago. She could barely feel her fingers despite the thermal gloves that were more fashion than function. The emergency beacon in her backpack had stopped working yesterday, its battery drained by the cold. She was alone, lost, and running out of time. The Zephyrians were methodical killers. They stood 8 feet tall, with crystalline skin that reflected light like broken glass. Their ships hovered silently above the city, scanning for heat signatures. Maya had watched them drag her colleagues from their hiding places, their screams cutting through the frozen air before being silenced forever. She ducked into an alley between 2 collapsed buildings. The walls provided some shelter from the wind, but not from the cold that seemed to seep through everything. Maya's scientific mind catalogued her situation with cruel precision. The snow had soaked through her boots hours ago, and her toes felt like blocks of ice. She closed her eyes and tried to remember warmth. Summer days on Earth. Her grandmother's kitchen. The heat from the laboratory's particle accelerator. A sound made her eyes snap open. Footsteps in the snow, but not the sharp crack of Zephyrian crystal feet. These were softer, more human. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Another survivor, or was she hallucinating from the cold? The footsteps came closer. Maya tried to call out, but only a whisper emerged from her frozen throat. She struggled to stand, her legs shaking with more than just cold. If this was a human, they might help her. If it was a Zephyrian scout, at least her suffering would end quickly. A figure appeared at the mouth of the alley. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like an ancient leather coat that should have been frozen solid but somehow moved like fabric. Steam rose from his body in the frigid air. His face was weathered, with deep lines around his eyes and a gray beard that had icicles hanging from it. But his eyes were warm, impossibly warm, like looking into a campfire. "Well now," he said in a voice that carried a strange accent Maya couldn't place. "Looks like you're in a heap of trouble, miss." Maya tried to speak, but only managed a small nod. The man stepped into the alley, and she could see more details now. His clothes were wrong for this climate and, this time. He wore worn jeans, leather boots with spurs that clinked softly, and a hat that belonged in old Earth westerns. Most impossibly, he didn't seem affected by the cold at all. "The name's Jake Morrison," he said, crouching down beside her. "And you look like you could use some help." Up close, Maya could see that Jake's skin had a slight bronze tint, and, when he breathed, the steam that rose from his mouth seemed to glow faintly. His eyes held depths that spoke of vast distances and long years. When he touched her shoulder, warmth spread through the frozen fabric of her jacket. "I don't understand," Maya whispered. "How are you not frozen?" Jake smiled, and it was like sunrise after a long night. "That's a story for when we get you somewhere safe, Doc. Right now, we need to get you warmed up before those crystal crawlers pick up your heat signature." He helped her to her feet with surprising gentleness for such large hands. Maya gasped as warmth flowed through her body where he touched her. It wasn't natural heat. It felt like standing too close to a fusion reactor, but comfortable instead of dangerous. "Who are you?" she managed to ask as Jake supported her weight effortlessly. "Just a cowboy, ma'am," he said, guiding her toward the back of the alley where Maya now noticed a section of wall had been melted through, creating a tunnel. "Though I reckon I'm a long way from home." As they walked through the tunnel, Maya felt her scientific mind racing despite her exhaustion. Jake's body temperature had to be at least 50 degrees above normal human levels. His clothes showed no signs of frost or ice. The tunnel they walked through was warm, the walls smooth as if they'd been shaped by incredible heat. "This isn't possible," she mumbled, her thoughts scattered by cold and confusion. Jake chuckled, a sound like distant thunder. "Miss, I've learned that possible is a mighty flexible word. Especially when folks are counting on you to make the impossible happen." They emerged into a hidden chamber that took Maya's breath away. The room was warm, almost tropical in temperature. Soft light emanated from the walls themselves, revealing a space that had been carved from solid rock with impossible precision. Comfortable furniture sat arranged around a central fire pit where flames danced without any visible fuel. "How?" Maya whispered, sinking into a chair that felt like it had been warmed by hours of sunlight. Jake hung his hat on a peg that seemed to grow from the stone wall. In the better light, Maya could see that his hair was streaked with silver, but his face looked neither young nor old. "Timeless, like mountains or stars." "The Zephyrians aren't the first aliens to take a swing at humanity," Jake said, settling into the chair across from her. "And they won't be the last. But every time, something interesting happens. Humans adapt. We find a way. We become something more than we were." He gestured to the warm chamber around them. "This place, these abilities, they're part of what humans become when we're pushed to the edge. When everything seems lost, when the night is coldest and darkest, that's when we find out what we're really made of." Maya stared at him, her scientific training warring with what she was experiencing. "You're saying you're human?" "As human as you, Doc," Jake said. "Just human from a different time. A time when humanity had to choose between extinction and evolution." The warmth of the chamber was seeping into Maya's bones, bringing feeling back to her hands and feet. With sensation came hope, a fragile flame that she'd thought had been extinguished forever. "The colonies," she said suddenly. "There are other survivors. Thousands of them, hiding in the underground shelters." Jake nodded slowly. "I know. That's why I'm here." "But one person can't fight an entire alien fleet," Maya protested. "Even if you're whatever you are." Jake's smile returned, and this time Maya saw something in it that made her think of stories told around campfires. Tales of lone riders who appeared when all seemed lost, who stood between civilization and chaos. "Doc," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "you're about to learn something important about cowboys. We don't much like bullies." Outside, the Zephyrian ships continued their silent patrol of the frozen city. Their sensors detected thousands of life signs hiding in bunkers and shelters, waiting for the aliens to find them. But they missed the warm chamber hidden deep beneath the ruins, where hope was being rekindled by the most unlikely savior. Maya wrapped her hands around a cup of something hot that Jake had given her. It tasted like cinnamon and starlight. As feeling returned to her body, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the freezing night wouldn't destroy her hope after all. "Tell me about the Zephyrians," Jake said, leaning forward in his chair. "Everything you know about their technology, their weaknesses, their plans." As Maya began to speak, she noticed that Jake's eyes seemed to glow brighter with each piece of information. Outside, the wind howled through the abandoned streets, but, in this hidden sanctuary, the temperature of hope was rising. Maya spent the next 3 days learning things that challenged everything she thought she knew about physics, biology, and the nature of humanity itself. Jake moved through their hidden sanctuary like he belonged there, tending a fire that never needed fuel, conjuring food from thin air, and maintaining a temperature that should have been impossible in the frozen wasteland above. "The Zephyrians have a weakness," Maya explained as she studied the alien technology samples Jake had somehow acquired. "Their crystalline structure makes them incredibly strong, but it also makes them vulnerable to specific resonance frequencies. If we could generate the right sonic wave." Jake nodded, his weathered hands working on something that looked like a cross between a harmonica and a piece of advanced alien tech. "Sounds always been powerful, Doc. Music can calm the savage beast or wake the dead. Question is, can you calculate the exact frequency we need?" Maya pulled out her portable computer, grateful that Jake's mysterious heat had somehow recharged its dead battery. "Give me their tissue samples and 12 hours. I can map their crystalline matrix and determine the resonance point." While Maya worked, Jake told her stories. Not the whole truth, not yet, but fragments that painted a picture of humanity's future that was both terrifying and inspiring. He spoke of colonies that learned to breathe methane, of humans who could survive in the vacuum of space, of a species that refused to be conquered no matter what the universe threw at them. Time works differently when you're traveling between stars, Jake said, watching Maya's fingers dance across her keyboard. Sometimes you arrive before you left. Sometimes you get a chance to fix things that went wrong the first time. Are you saying you're from the future? Maya asked, not looking up from her calculations. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Let's just say I know how this story is supposed to end. And I didn't much care for that ending. The resonance frequency turned out to be 2847.3 Hz, sustained for exactly 47 seconds. Maya had run the calculations 6 times to be certain. The sound would cause a cascade failure in the Zephyrian crystalline structure, effectively shattering them from the inside out. Beautiful work, Doc, Jake said, examining her data. Now comes the hard part. The hard part, it turned out, was getting close enough to the Zephyrian command ship to broadcast the frequency. The aliens had positioned their main vessel directly above the city center, surrounded by a defensive grid of smaller attack craft. No human technology could penetrate their shields. Good thing I'm not using human technology, Jake said. That night, Jake led Maya through tunnels she hadn't noticed before. The passages were warm and dry, carved from solid rock with the same impossible precision as their sanctuary. They stretched for miles beneath the city, connecting to bunkers and shelters where other survivors huddled in the cold. How many people know about these tunnels? Maya asked as they walked. Just you and me, right now, Jake replied. But that's about to change. They emerged in the central shelter, where nearly 3,000 colonists had gathered in the old subway system. Maya gasped at the sight of so many people in such a confined space. Children cried from the cold. Adults huddled together for warmth. The elderly sat quietly, many too weak to even shiver anymore. The heating system failed yesterday, said Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, Maya's former colleague. We're losing people every hour. The Zephyrians know we're here. It's only a matter of time before they break through our defenses. Jake stepped into the center of the crowded space. Despite his simple cowboy attire, something about his presence commanded immediate attention. Conversations died away. Even the children stopped crying. Folks, Jake said, his voice somehow reaching every corner of the vast underground space without him raising his volume, I know you're scared. I know you're cold. I know you think this is the end of your story. He paused, his eyes moving slowly across the faces of the survivors. Maya saw hope kindle in expressions that had been dead with despair moments before. But, I'm here to tell you something important, Jake continued. Humanity doesn't end here. Not today. Not ever. An elderly man near the front stood up shakily. Who are you to make such promises? We have no weapons, no ships, no way to fight back. Jake smiled, and Maya felt the temperature in the tunnel rise by several degrees. Sir, I'm just a cowboy who's traveled a long way to be here tonight. And I've got a job to do. He turned to address the crowd again. I need volunteers. 12 people who aren't afraid to walk into hell if it means saving everyone else. Hands shot up across the crowd. Men and women, young and old, all willing to face certain death for the chance to save their families. Maya raised her own hand, surprising herself with the speed of the motion. Jake selected his volunteers with care, choosing people based on criteria Maya couldn't understand. A teenage girl with bright purple hair. An elderly engineer with shaking hands. A middle-aged farmer who'd lost his entire family in the first attack. Each person Jake touched seemed to straighten, to grow stronger, as if his presence was sharing some of its impossible vitality. What exactly are we going to do? Asked the teenage girl, whose name was Sarah. Jake pulled out the device he'd been working on, now completed and humming with barely contained energy. We're going to give those crystal crawlers the song of my people. The plan was insane. Jake and his volunteers would move through the tunnels to positions directly beneath the Zephyrian ships. At precisely midnight, they would activate resonance transmitters and broadcast Maya's frequency simultaneously from 12 different points. The combined sonic wave would punch through the aliens' shields and shatter their crystalline bodies. "What about their weapons?" asked the old engineer, whose name was Roberts. "They'll cut us down the moment we emerge from the tunnels." Jake's expression grew serious. "That's where things get interesting, Roberts. You see, I haven't been entirely honest with you folks about what I am." He removed his leather coat, revealing arms that seemed to glow with internal fire. When he rolled up his sleeves, Maya could see that his skin had a metallic sheen, like bronze that had been heated in a forge. "The year I come from, humanity learned something important," Jake said. "We learned that evolution isn't just about biology. It's about will. It's about refusing to quit when every rational thought tells you to lie down and die." He touched Robert's hand, and the old man gasped as warmth flowed through his body. His shaking stopped. His back straightened. When he looked up, his eyes held a fierce light that Maya had never seen before. "What did you do to me?" Roberts whispered. "I reminded your body what it means to be human," Jake replied. "The real question is, what are you going to do with that reminder?" One by one, Jake touched each volunteer. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. They stood taller, moved with more purpose, seemed to radiate a confidence that bordered on the supernatural. Maya realized she was witnessing something that science couldn't explain, something that belonged more to legend than laboratory. "The Zephyrians think they know humans," Jake said as they prepared to move out. "They've studied our colonies, our technology, our military capabilities. They've calculated our weaknesses and planned for our strengths." He paused at the tunnel entrance, his hand resting on a section of wall that began to glow at his touch. "But they've never met humans who remember what we're capable of when pushed beyond the breaking point. They've never faced the part of humanity that gets stronger in the dark." Maya followed Jake and the volunteers through tunnels that seemed to reshape themselves as they walked, creating new passages toward their targets. The walls remained warm despite the frozen city above, as if Jake's presence was enough to hold back the killing cold. "How is this possible?" Maya asked as they climbed toward the surface. Jake looked back at her, his eyes now clearly glowing in the darkness. "Doc, you've spent your whole life studying alien life forms. Hasn't it ever occurred to you that maybe, just maybe, humans might be the strangest aliens in the galaxy?" They emerged into the frozen city at 11:47 p.m. The Zephyrian ships hung in the sky like crystalline spiders, their sensors sweeping the ruins for signs of life. Jake's volunteers spread out to their positions with a coordination that seemed telepathic. Maya crouched behind the ruins of a shopping center, her finger hovering over the transmitter's activation switch. Through her earpiece, she could hear Jake's voice, calm and steady despite the impossible odds they faced. "Remember, folks," he said. "We're not just fighting for New Denver Colony. We're fighting for the idea that humans don't give up. We're fighting for every colony that will face this choice in the years to come." At exactly midnight, 12 resonance transmitters activated simultaneously. The sound that emerged wasn't just frequency and wavelength. It was something deeper, something that seemed to carry the weight of human determination across the frozen city. The effect on the Zephyrian ships was immediate and devastating. Their crystalline hulls began to crack, spider web fractures spreading across their surfaces like ice breaking under spring sun. The aliens inside screamed, a sound like breaking glass that cut through the night air. But the Zephyrians didn't die quietly. As their ships began to fall from the sky, they turned their weapons on the city below, firing everything they had in a final act of spite. Energy beams lanced through the darkness, turning snow to steam and stone to slag. Maya watched in horror as one of the beams swept toward Jake's position. There was no way he could avoid it, no shelter that could protect him from that much concentrated energy. Instead of running, Jake stood up in the path of the beam and spread his arms wide. The energy struck him full in the chest, and, for a moment Maya was certain he had been vaporized. Then, the impossible happened. The energy beam stopped, held motionless in the air as if it had struck an invisible wall. Jake's body blazed with light, his form becoming difficult to look at directly. The beam began to bend, redirecting back toward the Zephyrian ship that had fired it. "Time to go home, boys," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly across the ruined city despite the chaos around them. The reflected energy struck the Zephyrian command ship and punched straight through its hull. The massive vessel began to spin out of control, its crystalline structure collapsing as internal explosions tore it apart from within. As the last alien ship crashed into the frozen streets, silence fell over New Denver colony. The attack was over. Humanity had won. The morning after the battle, Maya found Jake sitting on the ruins of what used to be the colony's central tower. The sun was shining for the first time in weeks, and the temperature had risen above freezing. Snow was melting in streams that caught the light like liquid diamonds. Jake looked tired, more human than he had since Maya first met him. The bronze glow had faded from his skin, though his eyes still held depths that spoke of vast distances and impossible knowledge. "It's over," Maya said, settling beside him on the warm stone. Even now, Jake's presence pushed back the cold. "This part's over," Jake agreed. "But the story's just beginning, Doc." Below them, the survivors of New Denver colony were emerging from their shelters. Children ran through the melting snow, laughing with the pure joy of being alive. Adults worked together to clear debris and assess damage. The elderly sat in the sunshine, faces turned toward warmth they'd thought they'd never feel again. "How many of them will remember what really happened?" Maya asked. Jake smiled, watching a group of volunteers distribute food and medical supplies. "They'll remember what matters. That when everything seemed lost, something helped them find the strength to keep fighting." Maya studied his profile, trying to reconcile the ordinary-looking cowboy with the being who had redirected alien weapons with his bare hands. "You never did tell me the whole truth about what you are." "I told you, Doc. I'm human." Jake picked up a piece of Zephyrian crystal from the rubble, turning it over in his weathered hands. "Just human from a time when our species learned what we're really capable of." "And when is that time?" Jake was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "About 300 years from now, a colony ship called the Prairie Wind gets attacked by something a lot worse than Zephyrians. The colonists are scientists, farmers, teachers. Good people, but not soldiers." He paused, the crystal in his hands beginning to glow with soft warmth. "They're outgunned, outnumbered, facing extinction. And, in that moment of absolute darkness, something awakens in the human genome. A potential that was always there, waiting for the right pressure, the right desperation." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "What kind of potential?" "The kind that lets a schoolteacher melt through 6 feet of solid steel with her bare hands," Jake said. "The kind that lets a farmer withstand the vacuum of space long enough to sabotage an alien dreadnought. The kind that lets a cowboy named Jake Morrison travel backward through time to make sure that awakening happens when humanity needs it most." The crystal in Jake's hands was now warm enough to melt the snow around his feet. Maya realized she was looking at technology being transformed by will alone, matter reshaping itself in response to human determination. "The Prairie Wind," she whispered. "That's your ship." "Was my ship," Jake corrected. "Will be my ship." Time gets complicated when you're trying to rewrite history. Maya's scientific mind reeled at the implications. "You're saying that what happened last night, the way you and the volunteers fought the Zephyrians, that was humanity's first step toward this evolution?" Jake nodded. "Every time humans face extinction and refuse to quit, we become a little more than we were before. It's not magic, Doc. It's adaptation on a scale the galaxy has never seen." "But why come back at all? If humanity survives without your intervention?" Jake's expression grew dark. "Because surviving isn't the same as thriving. In the original timeline, the Zephyrian attack on New Denver succeeds. The colony dies. That failure cascades through human space, colony after colony falling until we're pushed back to Earth." He stood up, brushing snow from his jeans. "We survive that too, eventually. But it takes 2,000 years of struggle, 2,000 years of barely hanging on by our fingernails. I came back to give humanity a head start on becoming what we're meant to be." Maya thought about the volunteers, about how they'd moved with impossible coordination, how they'd faced certain death without hesitation. "The people you touched, you awakened something in them too." "I reminded them of what they already were," Jake said. "Every human carries this potential, Doc. Every single one. Most never need to access it, but it's there, waiting." "What happens now?" Do you disappear back to your own time? Jake laughed, a sound like wind across open plains. Time doesn't work that way, at least not for me. I chose to come back, which means I chose to stay. The prairie wind and everyone on it ceased to exist the moment the Zephyrians failed to take New Denver. Maya felt a stab of loss for people she'd never met, for a future that would now never happen. You sacrificed your entire timeline to save ours. I traded one future for a better one, Jake said. That's what humans do, Doc. We make the hard choices so that others don't have to. Below them, the work of rebuilding continued. Maya watched Dr. Reeves directing medical teams with an efficiency that seemed impossible given the chaos of the past few days. Roberts, the elderly engineer, was supervising repair crews with energy that belied his years. Sarah, the teenage girl, was organizing supply distribution with the calm authority of someone twice her age. They're different now, Maya observed. All of them. They remember what it feels like to be fully human, Jake agreed. That's a memory that spreads, Doc. Each person they touch, each life they save, each impossible thing they accomplish, it all adds up. In a generation or two, humanity won't need anyone to remind them of what they're capable of. Maya stood and brushed snow from her clothes. Her scientific instruments were already registering unusual readings from the volunteers, subtle changes in their cellular structure and electromagnetic fields. She would spend years studying these changes, documenting humanity's first steps toward something greater. Will there be other attacks? She asked. Other aliens who underestimate us? Jake's smile held the promise of storms to come. Oh yes, Doc. The galaxy is full of species that think humans are just another primitive race to be conquered or enslaved. They're in for some surprises. Maya thought about the Zephyrian crystals scattered across the city, already being collected and studied by eager researchers. Alien technology that humanity would reverse engineer and improve upon. Another step forward, another adaptation. You know, she said, when I was hiding in that alley, freezing to death, I thought hope was just a chemical reaction. Endorphins and dopamine trying to convince the brain that survival was still possible. Jake picked up his hat from where it had been resting on the rubble and settled it on his graying head. And, now? Maya looked out over the bustling colony, at people who had faced extinction and chosen to rebuild instead. Now I think hope might be the most human thing of all. The refusal to accept that the story ends here. That's the secret the galaxy doesn't understand about humans, Jake said. We don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because surrendering never occurs to us as an option. A group of children ran past, playing some elaborate game that involved pretending to be space pilots fighting alien invaders. Their laughter echoed off the buildings, a sound of pure joy that seemed to warm the air around them. What about you? Maya asked. What do you do now that your mission is complete? Jake adjusted his hat and looked toward the horizon where other colonies dotted the landscape. Well, Doc, I reckon there are probably other folks out there who could use a reminder of what they're capable of. Humans have a habit of forgetting their own strength when times get easy. He started walking toward the edge of town, his boots crunching in the melting snow. After a few steps, he turned back to Maya. You take care of those volunteers, Doc. Study them, learn from them, but, most importantly, help them remember. The galaxy's a big place, and humanity's got a lot of growing to do. Maya watched him walk away, this impossible cowboy who had traveled through time to save her world. As he reached the outskirts of town, she could swear she saw him shimmer, as if he were already becoming something more than solid matter. Jake, she called after him. He paused and looked back. Thank you, she said simply. Jake touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that belonged to legends and old movies. Thank you, Doc. For giving an old cowboy a chance to do his job one more time. Then, he was gone, not vanishing dramatically but simply walking around a corner and somehow not being on the other side. Maya ran to look, but found only empty snow and the tracks of his boots leading nowhere. She spent the rest of the day working with the other survivors, documenting the changes in the volunteers, cataloging alien technology, and planning the colony's reconstruction. But part of her mind kept returning to Jake's words about humanity's potential, about the awakening that was just beginning. That night, as Maya lay in her bed in the temporary shelter, she could feel something different in the air. The volunteers slept peacefully, but their dreams seemed to glow with possibilities. Children who had witnessed impossible things talked excitedly about becoming space explorers. Adults made plans with the confidence of people who had seen miracles happen. The freezing night was over. Hope had survived, grown stronger, evolved into something new. And, somewhere in the vast galaxy, other species were about to learn that humanity was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Not because humans were warriors, though they could fight when necessary. Not because humans were technologically superior, though they could adapt and innovate with frightening speed. No, humanity was dangerous because they refused to stay conquered, refused to accept limitations, refused to believe that any night was too dark or too cold to overcome. And that, Maya realized as she drifted off to sleep, was perhaps the most terrifying thing any alien species could discover about their new neighbors. The cowboy had kept his promise. Hope was no longer just a chemical reaction. It had become humanity's greatest weapon, and the galaxy would never be the same.